Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Stirewalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
I know it. I know it to be true. Welcome to Ink-Stained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. Eliana Johnson, welcome. Hello.
Hello. And Chris, this week, congratulations are in order.
Oh, yes, that is true. I did.
You're Chris Stirewalt, but there is a future Mrs. Stirewalt.
I don't know whether she will take my name. But yes, I did.
In spirit, if not
in spirit.
Literally.
Yes, I was tremendously favored by Jessica Malugin, who accepted my proposal of marriage just before Easter. And it's very lovely. And her colleagues at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, in the most Washington, D.C. thing ever, the think tank where she works, put out a press release, a lighthearted and loving press release about our marriage, our incipient marriage, and our engagement. And it was when think tank to think tank press release on engagement is an achievement unlocked for Washingtonian life. But it's I don't want to be too sappy, but you've probably heard me quote Richard Thaler before, who's the father of behavioral economics at University of Chicago, and he used to say, we don't think people are stupid, we think life is hard. And life can be hard, right? Life deals us a lot of setbacks, and life can be very challenging. I've had fewer than most people probably, but had my share. But sometimes you get a sweetener. Sometimes you get a bright light that comes in. And Jessica has been that bright light in my life. It has been a really wonderful thing, and it's definitely proof to me that my sister calls them breadcrumbs, things that God leaves you on your path in life to let you know you're going the right direction. And Jessica is the biggest breadcrumb of them all.
Can't wait for the wedding. I said can't wait for the wedding. You said can't wait for the marriage.
Can't wait. That's right. I definitely can't wait to be married to her, but yes, whatever, we'll have a style section on the wedding. Yes.
Oh yeah, that'll be the best.
Yeah.
Well, we're linking the tweet.
Yes, put the tweet in. That's fine.
That'll
be fine. Eliana Johnson, your sunglasses are spectacular.
Thank you.
Can you show the internet? Perf. I have sunglasses not entirely dissimilar to those, and I'm a big fan. That's good. Getting to style section a little early.
I guess it's sunny outside, but it's like 30 degrees, so
it's all right. It's been
horrible.
Washington's third false spring has been cruel in its own way, but the sun is shining today. It's very beautiful.
You know what's not beautiful for President Joe Biden?
What's that?
Is our front page. That is not beautiful. When I saw this, I was eager to get your thoughts on the splashy Wall Street Journal headline story that Trump leads Biden in 6 of 7 swing states. Incumbent trails in most battlegrounds that decided 2016 and 2020. And the Journal writes, the poll of the election's main battlegrounds shows Trump holding leads of between 2 and 8 percentage points in 6 states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. On a test ballot that includes third-party and independent candidates, Trump holds similar leads when voters are asked to choose only between him and Biden. That being said, Biden in this poll was leading in Wisconsin by 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, are there reasons for folks to doubt the poll's accuracy?
No, I think this is a good poll. We've seen an increase. There's been a trend line helping Biden of late. We've seen some polling that suggests that Biden has rallied a little bit, but certainly this is in keeping with what we've been seeing for months in these states. two things I would point out. Wisconsin, which should be harder for Biden than Pennsylvania, should be harder for Biden than Michigan, just based on how many Republicans and Democrats are in those states. Like, it's no surprise, for example, that Biden does the worst in Arizona and Georgia and North Carolina, which are the most Republican states. But it's odd that he's underperforming in Wisconsin compared to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and even Nevada. My explanation for this probably has something to do with Nikki Haley kind of voters. Wisconsin has high educational attainment compared to some of these other states, and a lot more social cohesion. These are my colleague Tim Carney's unalienated Americans, and if you look in the north suburbs of Milwaukee, there's a lot of these sort of traditional conservative Republicans. So I think that may explain some of it. But the other thing I would say is, in none of these polls is Donald Trump at 50%. Not in a single state, not in North Carolina, not in Arizona, and Georgia is very indicative here. In Georgia, Trump is leading 44-43. So what does that tell us? Donald Trump should not be doing 44% of the vote in Georgia. Donald Trump should be doing 54% of the vote in Georgia. So two things I think are obvious. Biden is sucking wind. Joe Biden that he is in Pennsylvania should not be at 44%. He should be at 54%. So Joe Biden is underperforming. But a friend of mine, an astute observer, a guy of long experience, summed it up, and I've been stealing it, which is, I don't think it's possible for Donald Trump to win this election.
Joe Biden will lose it.
But I do think it's possible that Joe Biden could lose it. And this poll shows how anemic Biden is in places where he should be strong.
And the Journal published a related piece yesterday, a few days after the poll ran, about their takeaways from the poll. And the focus is largely on Biden's losses. So they write, at this moment, under this president, the mix of Black, Latino, and young voters who have been crucial to electing Democratic candidates are withholding support from Biden or shifting toward Donald Trump, a trend particularly dramatic among men. By contrast, it is hard to find a group where Biden is improving on his standing from the 2020 election.
Right. And, just as it will be very hard for Donald Trump to replicate his 2016 coalition, it's going to be very hard for Joe Biden to replicate his 2020 coalition. It's tough. There's no doubt about these people, and the Americans have strong opinions. Biden just has to hope that big chunk of undecideds that haven't come in for him don't go vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and they eventually come to conclude that it would be too dangerous to have Donald Trump as president again. And the last thing I'll say, there was a piece, and I should have included it in the show, a Washington Post profile of Biden's campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez. Is that right? Yes. And where she praised Ilhan Omar, where she talked about the need to rebuild this coalition of Black and brown Americans and do all of this stuff. The problem that Biden definitely has a problem on sort of the far left or among radical or aggressive progressives. Certainly he does. But where the data, and my colleague Rui Teixeira, the work that he has done with the great Nate Moore and others, where's the problem for Biden? Yes, it's about younger voters typically for Black and Hispanic voters, but it's not necessarily that they're progressive. It's that they're normal, right? They think Biden's too old. They think the inflation has been too high. They have normal concerns. And so this thing about wanting to otherize or make different these voters probably makes that worse than it does help with the more radical constituency.
And in that profile of Biden's campaign manager, they talk a lot about how she Cesar Chavez's granddaughter, and she is clearly the emissary to the radical left coalition. And then I think the real people in charge of this campaign are Anita Dunn and the folks in the White House. But she says, we want to continue to work with and engage these communities if and when they're ready, she added, talking about, the radical left, noting that she met with other Arab American leaders during that Michigan trip. The campaign is seeing some important openings, she said. Rep. Ilhan Omar, one of 2 Muslim women in Congress, has really started to outline what's at stake in this election.
She's on it. Ilhan Omar's really nailed it.
Got her finger on the pulse of, the American electorate.
Take it to the bank.
Axios, meanwhile,
Colin
had a piece.
Colin, I love this find from Colin. Just magnificent.
Behind the curtain, how Trump's mind works, and the graphic is Donald Trump's head photoshopped on the body of a DJ.
I think that's Kate Middleton.
Clad in gold jewels and a wife beater.
I think you're supposed to say spouse beater. I don't think you're supposed to make it about women. Former President Trump thinks, talks, and acts like no other politician in our lifetime, blah, 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 blah. At his Oceanside retreat in Palm Beach, Trump controls the surround sound stereo system on the breezy dining patio with his big iPad and its Spotify list. Regulars jokingly call it the DJT performance. Why it matters. Oh, Axios, every time I want to praise you, you just insult me and you make it impossible. Why it matters. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe just write a piece. To those who know him best, Trump spinning through his golden oldies provides a telling lens into his style on much bigger stages. It captures his obsession with a few familiar hits. Well, maybe if you didn't have these dumb prompts, you wouldn't have had to write that paragraph. But anyway, what is in here is an interesting thing about Donald Trump and he has a velvet rope next to his chair for supplicants. So when he sits at dinner, there is a velvet rope so that supplicants can come and make obeisance to him and ask for his favor. They can kiss the ring. And the other thing that's the sort of gross that you get to read about is he has his little stage-managed entrance in every evening, and he comes out and everybody stands up and applauds him. And then he goes and takes his iPad and sits there at his little chair behind his little velvet rope while everybody tells him how wonderful he is. That's the creepiest thing. I'm trying to imagine Ronald Reagan. I can't even imagine Barack Obama doing that. It's unimaginable to me that a person would want to do that every evening. But he does it. And then here's the playlist: Phantom of the Opera, Jesus Christ Superstar, Elvis, Hello by Lionel Richie, Guns N' Roses, November Rain, and the duet by James Brown and Luciano Pavarotti. It's a man's world. Sinead O'Connor's Nothing Compares to You is a favorite. What a list, baby. What a list.
This did get to something that I think people don't talk about enough, which is that there is the existential aspect of this race for Trump, which is that he's got to win or he's probably going to jail.
Yeah.
However, he is also having the time of his life.
Yeah.
Running for election, which one does not get the sense that Biden is having a total blast. And being president is hard. Biden's probably doing a bit more of the job than Trump was doing, where he's basically watching TV all day. But Trump, in terms of the campaigning, the guy loves it, and he's having a total blast.
I don't know. I think Trump likes.
I think he loves it.
I think Trump likes curated reality. I think he and the people around him curate a reality for him, like he curates his Spotify playlist. Right. I think it's a bespoke reality that Trump wants to live in. And it's weird. I find the whole scene deeply weird.
What do we have next year?
Oh, speaking of Donald Trump, so we have the New York Times has Lachlan Cartwright, who worked at the National Enquirer back in the back when everything was going sideways. and the catch and kill story and Stormy Daniels and all of this stuff. So this, I am fascinated by the National Enquirer, right? I find the story of the National Enquirer as a journalistic entity, you know, using the no air quotes necessarily, but as the National Enquirer did break a lot of stories over the years, and it did a bunch of stuff. And this is a piece that takes you inside the National Enquirer and how it worked and this guy's recollections on it. And I found it fascinating.
Lachlan Cartwright was at the Daily Beast and is now at the Hollywood Reporter, I believe. And he did some very good and aggressive media reporting, which there isn't a ton of anymore. However, I didn't feel like I really learned anything new in this piece, which I read in its entirety. Nonetheless, it was interesting to hear a firsthand account of being inside the Enquirer.
Totally.
But the story is sort of, I think, been told many times. And he talks about actually being a source for mainstream accounts of what happened at the National Enquirer, so which is why the story sounded familiar.
Yes.
Chris, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about coverage of Biden, the aid convoy, Israel, Gaza. Trying to figure out what the best story is to start with here.
So there was a meeting. Speaking of outreach to the Julie Chavez Rodriguez that she was talking about, they brought a Ramadan all-star team together at the White House
For a dinner.
to talk about, to bring together for dinner and talk about these issues. Now, one cat who came to the dinner did that thing, which is what like Nancy Pelosi did to Donald Trump. I accepted the invitation so that I could leave, right? I came to the dinner so that I could walk out of it. And this person, how can we talk about famine and starvation over bread and steak, said Dr. Thayer Ahmad, a Palestinian-American doctor who was in Gaza in January. The moment epitomized just how problematic the war in Gaza has become for Mr. Biden, who is increasingly critical of Israel, but still resisting calls from within his party to set conditions on weapon sales to the country. So that's the Times piece. And then NBC News takes an even more intense, more labored look at this doctor and his storming out of the dinner with the president. And I would just say, don't accept the invitation.
Well, they note, NBC knows, many others who had been invited to attend declined, according to multiple sources familiar with the outreach, which this is now happening repeatedly for the White House. It happened when they went to Michigan. That's what Biden's campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, was mentioning when she praised Ilhan Omar. Another doctor who attended was taken aback when she showed Biden prints of photos of malnourished children and women in Gaza, to which Biden responded that he had seen those images before. This speaks volumes about the dismissive nature of the administration when it comes to strong-willed actions towards a permanent ceasefire, or at a bare minimum, a red line on the invasion of Rafah. All right. Okay, don't attend. Sure. But I do not understand what the White House's strategy is here. There is nothing they can do short of breaking the U.S.-Israel alliance completely that will pacify this group of people.
Right.
And meanwhile, they are increasingly alienating the pro-Israel community in the United States.
Yes.
And so they're having it neither way
Right.
by trying to walk this middle ground, which is rhetorically critical of Israel, but in action continuing to supply Israel with aid.
Well, if I may, we have a related facile file, and it perfectly encapsulates what you're talking about. So this is from the Washington Post. U.S. approved more bombs to Israel on the day of the World Central Kitchen strikes. Now, the World Central...
Like, in tandem,
tandem.
Israel dropped the bomb and the White House at that moment.
As if somehow what's amazing about the piece and the breathless nature of its writing is, do you think the people in the Defense Department or whatever the mechanism for military aid to Israel works, do you think that they were like, I see that they killed aid workers I see the Israeli army killed aid workers. Let's get them some more bombs pronto. And the childish attachment of these two things to each other and the way that the headline was done. This would be a note in a grown-up story, right? You might use it as a poignant way to express the complexity of the situation. But in a federal government with millions of employees and trillions of dollars of expenditure, the idea that these two things are somehow linked or somehow related is childish, pandering.
The assumption also undergirding the piece is that, if you read the whole thing, is that the U.S. should be cutting off aid because of this mistake by the Israeli government. And I've noted, I've taken note in the two pieces above, one sentence we didn't read in the NBC News piece, and this is now just routine in the Times sometimes does note this, but in the NBC News piece, it says more than 30,000 people have died, according to health officials, since Hamas's terrorist attacks in Israel on October 7th, and the group is still holding more than 100 hostages captives.
Which health officials?
They do not note, so they say that in passing, they do not note, A, that the number comes from Hamas. They do not note that Hamas doesn't distinguish between terrorist casualties and civilian casualties. And the entire Washington Post piece, which repeats that number, is undergirded with the assumption, and the quotes in it, larded up with quotes, that the U.S. should exact some sort of reprisal on Israel for this mistake. And nowhere in there do they quote a pro-Israel voice that says, you know what? It's actually unprecedented in a war for one combatant to be facilitating aid to the civilians of their enemy. This doesn't happen in a war. And when that's happening, things like this are going to happen.
The double standard in coverage here is pretty obvious.
The coverage is so bad. It is just awful.
So Israel does what Western nations try to do in conflict here, which is they acknowledged the mistake. They apologized for it. They expressed their regret for it. They were fairly transparent about the whole thing, right? They acknowledged it. They didn't do whatever. How many aid workers do you suppose have died as a result of Hamas violence? Not none. It's whatever the number is, it's not none.
And in Biden's statement, he says, Biden issued a statement saying Israel must do better. Israel has to do better.
And there is a double standard when you want to be. Some of the double standard is understandable, right? If you want to be a advanced, developed nation that abides by the rules of modern warfare, you got to hold yourself to a different standard. But in the coverage, there is very little, if any, acknowledgement of the fact that Hamas's leverage in this fight is rooted in the fact that they obey no rules. They rape, murder, kill, take captive, hold people captive. They abuse, they lie. They take credit. It's interesting. They say nothing about the people they accidentally kill, but the people they kill on purpose, they post videos bragging about their slaughter. And I understand that Israel does hold itself to a different standard than Hamas does, and I get that. But this coverage about Israel making a mistake and then trying to do right about it, you can think whatever you want about Israel's effort to prosecute this war. You can agree or disagree, but the casualties of the people who are part of Jose Andres' charity, those casualties are a tragic byproduct of something else. They're not the point of anything. Right. This is a tragic story, but it's not. But it reflects an Israel that's trying to follow some rules of engagement here, not Hamas that follows no rules of engagement.
You said, like, this is sort of the way, this is what Western countries do in war. They come out, they take responsibility. But, the parallel that some people have noted is that the U.S. made a similar mistake following the pullout in Afghanistan, where they mistakenly droned 10 people and killed 7. And I don't recall Joe Biden getting up and saying, "I'm so sorry, we made a mistake." Actually, that came out, and we'll link the piece. That doozy came out through a New York Times report and was uncovered through a Freedom of Information Act. And then Biden has the temerity to say Israel isn't doing, Israel isn't upholding, the standards. They're not doing good enough, when he did not do this himself when he botched the withdrawal from Afghanistan. The military on his watch has done this thing, and he did not come out and take responsibility and apologize. And the media was the one that uncovered and held him accountable for this.
Yep.
So it is galling. And by the way, the mainstream media is not noting this.
Right.
They are not noting this.
Or anytime lots of advanced Western countries, when you're fighting a war, bad things happen.
So I'm just going to link that article right now.
Link it up.
That brings us to our business section. And Chris, you flagged this very interesting piece about Ted Cruz's podcast and the backdoor way in which he is reaping the benefits from it.
So the Houston Chronicle gets the nod for originally reporting it, but we're including here Cruz was talking to a local TV station, and the reporter had the good sense. Shannon Ryan had the good sense to say, "Hey, about this." And so here's the deal. Ted Cruz has a very successful podcast, and he does it in conjunction with iHeartRadio. And he does it. He has a co-host who's also a radio host, whose name is Ben whatever, who's like a talk radio host. And they have this podcast, and it's been very successful. And Ben Ferguson. Yeah, he used to be on Fox till I think he got in trouble for doing ads for gold coins or something. But anyway, so Cruz and Ferguson do this commercial product, and Cruz has made a point of saying, "But I don't get a nickel from anybody for it because it's a service to the constituents of Texas, and it's da 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 da." And then you know what the Chronicle found out? iHeartRadio has been dumping large amounts of cash into Cruz's PAC. And what's the number? I'm going to tell you the number. It is
$630,000, right?
$630,000 American dollars, which is a lot of dollars. And when this reporter for ABC 13 in Houston asked him about it, what was Cruz's response? Was he chill about it? Did he say, "Oh, that's we really hadn't thought about it that way. That's a good point. I'd like to be accountable"? What did he do? He said, "You liberal media, this is what you and the liberal media do. You don't talk about what's important. You don't ask me the important questions like, isn't Joe Biden very bad? You don't ask me the key questions. You just want to talk about the shady way in which the people in corporations funnel money into my PAC. How dare you?" And Cruz blames this on a left-wing. Hold on a second. Let me answer your question. You asked the question. I know you're not asking about it, but the group that brought this attack is a left-wing Democrat attack group. And by the way, you know what you didn't mention in your question? The fact that they filed the complaint with the Senate Ethics Committee and raised the same issues. You know what the Senate Ethics Committee did? They threw it out. They said it had no basis in law. And it's like, okay, bro, sure. This is something interesting.
I was going to say, I found this very interesting because I think we will start to see more politicians who are opinionated and have some personality doing this, because what an interesting way to raise money.
Launder or raise, yes.
Truly, like, it's clever.
It's
It's pretty clever. I give him credit.
it's
Take my hat off.
it's clever, but the idea
Like, he's doing a service that people are interested in,
okay.
and it's clever.
But you shouldn't say that you're not getting any money for
I
it.
agree.
You shouldn't
Totally
say that.
agree.
And it's a weird workaround, and
I think we're going to see more of it. Far be it for politicians to find weird workarounds to get money.
And I'm sure that stuff like this has gone on before, but I will be interested to see about the side door channeling of campaign funds for media products.
Chris, your son
My eldest man-child.
flagged this piece that has such a great headline about the greedy, grubby, gross practices as Vice collapse.
Yes. Transparent
Called
Vice.
Transparent Vice
Yep.
at The Verge. And one of the pull quotes on the side of it is, since at least 2021, Vice has not had a NetJets account.
It is
Another one is this what working at WeWork felt like?
so it's this so one of the things that comes through in this piece is Vice is like the Theranos of media. They convinced a lot of very wealthy investors that they had a very new way of being and they were going to be different from everything that ever came before. And they raised a, as they say, dizzying $5.7 billion behind Vice, which is now defunct. They raised all this money on the premise that they were going to disrupt journalism and they were going to make it sexy and cool and super profitable, and it was going to be all thanks to all people. And then they burned through all of this money. And here's the thing. You know it's much harder to pitch to billionaire investors? Yeah, the returns are going to be kind of mid, actually, because it's the news. And we're going to do our best, but it's important to do this the right way. So we hope you'll manage your expectations. And our goals are to be fair and accurate, and we're going to try to do a good workmanlike job of covering the news. That will not get you a $5.7 billion valuation.
What is unbelievable to me are the people who fell for this.
Yes. Like
Rupert
Theranos.
Murdoch,
Yes.
like Rupert Murdoch. Unbelievable.
Like Theranos, it's like what you're saying is we can have, and look, if you have billions of dollars, you can afford to burn a little here and there, but Vice was quite a pyre.
Chris, that brings us
This
to
is
our
a very good style section for you.
style section. And we have two Wall Street Journal pieces. The first is, you spent $6,000 on a secondhand Chanel bag. Now find out if it's real. And you know what? This just goes to my penchant for buying fakes. I feel reaffirmed in my...
Just buy the fake.
Yeah, just buy the fake. Because
Don't pay this
look,
woman $50.
Yeah, you're spending $6,000 and you don't even know. You have to go to some expert to find out if it's real.
But that's that.
So they quote the expert
Yes.
saying, "The leather is too symmetrical," said Zekrayat Hussein, studying the bag through a microscope, "and each pebble is not supposed to be the same size. It was a good fake," she said, "but worthless compared with the $11,000 that the Chanel flap bag fetches at retail." I mean, if you got to put this thing under a microscope, that's a good fake. Like, I pay $300 for that. Price hikes and purchasing limits on bags haven't kept wealthy shoppers away from Chanel. Well, our next piece is going to get to that. Its annual revenue rose 17% in 2022 to $17.2 billion. But the sticker shock is fueling the resale market as the best option for mid-priced customers who can score a pre-owned Chanel bag ranging from $3,000 to $8,000. OMG.
Woof.
What has followed is a cottage industry of independent authenticators who can easily tell a counterfeit from the real McCoy. But their jobs have gotten harder as the quality of fakes has reached new heights. So even high-end consignees may end up unwittingly selling knockoffs. Return fraud, where customers buy real luxury goods, then get refunds by returning fake ones, also plagues the primary market. And I read something about return fraud, where now websites, if you return too many things, they will prohibit you from purchasing from
Makes
them
sense.
again because they fear this.
Yeah. You're buying and returning. Yeah.
Super interesting. And the next piece actually kind of contradicts this one.
Okay.
So the headline is more fashion cachet for less cash, why the 1% are favoring these under-the-radar labels. And the lead anecdote is about a wealthy woman who saw a Prada cardigan in a window, and she went in and said, hey, how much is that cardigan? And they tell her it's $6,300. And she says, oh, I have one that just like that for $1,200 in my closet.
A scant $1,200.
What the heck happened? And it is true that every year there are price increases on these things, and they're way more than inflation. So this piece talks about how some wealthy people are just spurning the high-end fashion labels totally because they're getting way too expensive. So let me read. Heiji Choi Black, 46, grew disillusioned with luxury items earlier this year. A $4,000 dress she had coveted online felt flimsy, said the Chicago-based CEO and founder of lifestyle brand June Otte. Black's mood darkened further after she realized that among luxury brands, even basic denim was retailing for over $1,000. The bud was off the rose, she said. Her solution? To put FaceTime back into the equation and start shopping in person rather than online. Smaller boutiques are really well curated, she said.
But isn't the point of the goods to be expensive, right? Aren't these Veblen goods where the appeal, the demand for them is created by the fact that they're preposterously expensive?
But it's like too preposterous.
Okay. It's too Veblen. It's a double Veblen.
This woman says, as long as the clothes are actually good, and good is hard to find. So this woman said, Sarah Kuntz, 37, the managing director of San Francisco venture firm Clio Capital, the $10,000 polyester party dresses she recently encountered in one extremely high-end boutique particularly peeved her. The spaghetti straps could snap after a few wears, she said.
For 10 grand. For 10 grand. I tell you what, ladies.
So, anyhow, it talks about these a lot of brands people are turning to that I'd never heard of.
And I bet you found some new brands. I bet we may be seeing
never heard
these.
Of them. Maybe I will take a gander.
We may be seeing these. And I'll just point out, your purse today is very traditional.
Very fake.
Is it fake?
It's fake.
Can you hold it up?
Very
Can
fake.
you show are you willing to show?
I'm willing to show. It's fake.
It's a fake what?
Fake Bottega.
And how much would that be?
How much would it cost?
If it was real.
Like $4,000.
And are you willing to say what you paid?
I paid $300 something.
Looks like a nice bag.
Yeah.
See? There you go. There you go, Bottega. Get some Bottega for your bodega.
Okay. Chris, that brings us to our obsessions of the week. Where we break down the stories we can't get out of our heads.
And it's
yours.
Yes.
Whoa. Okay. So I watched with my husband. I came home one night and we put our daughter down and he was like, the LSU Iowa game is on tonight, women's. And I said to him, whoa, I think Chris flagged the article about this coach and blah, blah. So I'm watching the coach, Kim Mulkey.
Yep.
And I go look up the profile.
Because we had talked before.
We talked last week, and I was like, who is this woman?
She went
I have
on
nothing
the attack
to say
in
about
a
her.
press conference.
Yeah, the Washington Post had spent months working on this profile about her, and I had no idea who she was. We didn't know what the article was going to be, and so I just had no opinion. Like, she's peremptorily attacking an article, and we hadn't seen the article. So the profile dropped. It was a profile of her. It is phenomenal. It's really long, and it is so, so, so good. She is clearly extremely demanding. She wants her players to look a certain way. There are a lot of lesbians in women's basketball.
True.
And she wants them to, like, she says that basically, I don't care about your sexuality. I don't want to know about it. She doesn't want to talk to them about anything except basketball. She wants them to look like ladies. And she's extremely well coiffed.
Yes, she's well put together.
She prizes loyalty over everything. So her father cheated on her mother, and she hasn't spoken to her father in 40 years. So this part was really interesting. It says she's also known to hold grudges and clash with players, including about their appearances and displays of their sexuality, according to interviews with former players and news reports. Mulkey and Brittany Griner, the coach's biggest star at Baylor, have feuded for more than a decade. And while Griner's 294-day detainment in a Russian prison eventually required White House intervention, it wasn't enough to ease tension long after Griner first said Mulkey encouraged gay players to hide their sexuality and, quote, keep your business behind closed doors, Griner wrote in her memoir. Mulkey said publicly, thank God she's back with her family, but apparently the two haven't actually talked. And let's see. Griner is gay, but she didn't come out publicly until 2013 after her final game at Baylor. Still, whenever Mulkey sensed Griner was distracted or stressed, Mulkey blamed girlfriend problems. Griner later wrote, even if Griner wasn't dating anyone. Mulkey also called out players if they gained weight, instructing the team's strength coach to conduct weigh-ins in front of the team. Players weren't to bring non-basketball matters to Mulkey, they say, encouraged to confide in assistant coaches instead. Some of these former players spoke on condition of anonymity because of fears of retaliation in the close-knit women's basketball community. Mulkey's attorney said the former players' allegations were too vague to respond to. You got to read the whole thing.
It's a great
phenomenal
profile. And her attempt to pre-butt it increased interest in the profile.
Well, it turns out I think that was good for her because I think the profile overall spoke quite well of her. And if I were her, I would have wanted people to read it.
She's
clearly a complicated person, but like it was positive overall.
Yeah, she has the kind of psycho energy that guys like Bobby Knight and men's basketball coaches have demonstrated over the years. And as women's basketball continues its climb, I assume that as the money goes up, right? Because being I don't know what a big time men's college basketball coach gets paid these days, probably what, $5 million?
And she's
$10
making
million?
Oh yeah, I think
$9 million.
And she's making 3.2 something million.
So as the viewership has gone up, Caitlin Clark, and they got the biggest ever women's the LSU Iowa game was the biggest ever viewership for a women's basketball game, and Caitlin Clark has become this heroine. She's become this national figure. As the revenues go up, the pressure on these coaches will go up, and more of them will act like. I mean, let me just say, I don't like Bobby Knight. I don't like that kind of coaching. I don't like that approach. I don't like the psycho. I don't like that stuff. I think that I like the Phil Jackson approach. I like and certainly there's something to be said for aloofness, right? For being apart, but the psycho part, I'm not into it. I don't favor it. It's a game. It's a game, and these are young people. It's a game. You're like, let it rip.
I'm sort of torn in that I do think that if you played for her, you would come out stronger, better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you.
Russian jail was nothing after you played for Kim Mulkey.
Exactly. Exactly.
You were like, fine, Putin. I've been there. Okay, my obsession is a solipsistic obsession this week. It is an obsession with something that I already wrote about for my Tuesday column in the Dispatch. Headline, The Idiotic Astrophysics of Umbrage. And I'm sure you saw the story about Joe Biden putting out on Good Friday, putting out the statement that Sunday was International Trans Visibility Day, Transgender Visibility Awareness Day. And this was the perfect 5-day empty calories media controversy, right? Joe Biden put out a bunch of proclamations for things that were going to happen for April, like it's Organ Donor Month, it's Cesar Chavez Day, it's blah, 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 all of the stuff, right? And one of those things was the empty sentiments surrounding International Transgender Visibility Day. And I make the point in the piece, by the way, we're not struggling with transgender visibility these days. 0.6% of American adults identify, according to Pew, as transgender. I don't feel like it's 0.6% of the news. I feel like it's an extraordinary amount of the news. There are about the same number of Americans who identify as being transgender adults as live in the city of Philadelphia. I feel like we get a lot more news about transgender America than we do about Philadelphia. And the obsession with this story is because of sex, right? It's titillating. It's about sexual identity. It's about sexual preference. It's about sex. And it's taboo and it's controversial. And so left and right, and it's constantly churned. So point one, I don't think visibility is a problem. We've got plenty of transgender visibility. But then number two, here I'll just read. I'll quote myself in the grossest move possible. I'll quote myself. Even without the specifics, which are too tedious for me to repeat here, you know the well-rehearsed pattern of pouncing and counter-pouncing. Ignorant or willfully ignorant people level false claims with great umbrage. And in this case, it was that Biden had moved it to Easter or was having it on Easter when he wasn't, right? He was just putting out boilerplate claptrap with great umbrage. Then the targets of that umbrage respond with even greater indignation than the accusations. So then you get the snapback where it's like, how dare you say this? This is outrageous. Then it's time for the controversies within the controversy. And this one was about the egg board. Did you see that piece? So the White House Easter egg roll, which my eldest man-child, who is here with us today, has attended as a small person. He's not a small person anymore.
As
He's
a child.
Sasquatch, yes. But the White House Easter egg roll is sponsored, obviously, by the National Egg Council. And the National Egg Council has long had rules about you can't have religious stuff on your Easter eggs, which is weird for a holiday that is the highest holiday of the Christian calendar. But whatever, I understand why they don't want religious enfranchisement at the White House. Fine. Then that became a sub-controversy within the Transgender Day controversy. And then that burned. And I write, until the story has been pumped of what little substance it has ever had and becomes only about how so-and-so felt about the feelings of so-and-so, and so on, until they're down to the dregs of news adjacency. And then they just keep pumping. And the last two articles about dregs of news adjacency, and they just keep pumping. One was a Fox piece about a NBA player who had a tweet about the false controversy here. And then Huffington Post had a piece about what Caitlyn Jenner said about the decision. So I'm always obsessed with this because this with rage revenue. And this is a perfect example of something that if you never knew about this, it wouldn't have affected your life at all. It doesn't affect anybody. It was all empty, right? It was all empty calories. Biden puts out one of these dumb proclamations every year. Who cares, right? But if you want to be engaged in it, the media will serve you up constantly something to be outraged about. And then you get to be outraged about other people's outrage. And it just goes on in this Mobius strip of anger and outrage. And it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't take you anywhere. And I would just encourage people, when you see a story like this, ask yourself, does this matter? Is this relevant? Does this count? And if it doesn't, save yourself. You don't have to dive in and swim down to the bottom of all of this and consume these empty calories.
Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week.
So good.
Which is reader mail. And we have a note from David Smith in Warrenton, Virginia.
This is a great quote.
Who says, Chris and Eliana, the patrons of the climate cafes profiled in the New York Times should take a bit of advice from C.S. Lewis. On Living in an Atomic Age, he wrote,
good.
If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. In other words, take a deep breath, pour yourself a drink, take care of your family and friends, and show up to work on time.
Oh, I love it, David Smith. I love it, and I love that essay and that Lewis quote, which I've used before. It's so, so good and so right. Yay.
And, Chris, we also have a note from Leonard Goodnight, who wants to know.
Uh-oh.
Hi, Al Wretches. Could y'all comment on this innovative method of drinking beer and or eating a hot dog? Definitely seems like the sort of thing Chris might have seen before, whether in a holler back home or in a big city baseball stadium. I was only surprised that the innovator is a Yankee fan. This seems like grade A hillbilly jury-rigging to me. Now, this is a guy, like, poking a hole in his hot dog.
He takes a straw.
Drink, yeah.
Now, what's interesting about the video, and this is a sort of an annual resurfacing of this video, but it's a guy who takes out his Yankee dog. He takes the straw from his Coke, and he pokes a hole through his Frankfurter.
And turn it into a straw.
And then uses the hot dog itself to drink his beer. And what I find amazing about the video, a dude that is using a hot dog as a straw, you would expect to be doing it for the lulz, right? You would expect him to be showing his friends. You would expect him to be trying to embarrass his wife doing it, that it would be like, but the amazing thing about our craftsman here, he's working alone. He's working, not ashamedly, but with intent. Like, this is not a stunt. This is something that he meant to do, that he is well rehearsed in doing, and he like a cobbler at his last. He punctures his Frankfurter and drinks his beer with it, and it's really quite impressive.
Also, Mr. Goodnight says, this question is at least for Chris. I may be too horrified to speak. I was not
You're
horrified.
not horrified.
No.
Would you do that? Would you drink a hot dog would you drink a beer through a hot dog straw?
Sure. I mean, I'm not
I mean,
horrified by it.
salty and beer, people do it. I
I'm
mean,
not
people do
horrified
the
by it.
Corona. I don't know. It's possible.
I'm not horrified.
Colin says no. Nate. Nate's
Nate
a mid.
would
Nate
never
would do
do
it.
that.
Nate would do it.
Nate
would
I
do
don't
it.
think Nate would do it.
it.
He's too sophisticated.
Nate would do it.
Nate's sophisticated.
But I think we owe all of the culinary entrepreneurs out there in this world of ours who are trying these things, we owe them our credit. We should stand behind the velvet rope line at their chair and ask them to cue it up on the playlist for us.
That brings us to your favorite time of the week,
Yay.
where I am forced to say something nice. But as always, please lead by example.
Washington Post headline, wait, does America suddenly have a record number of bees? Now, I've written about this in a book. I've talked about it before, but one of the great hysteria stories of the past decade was the death of the pollinators. And we were treated to years of coverage about how the danger of what's going on with all the pollinators and all of this stuff. And so kudos to Andrew Van Dam at the Washington Post, who writes a piece that says, and it's unclear whether we were overestimating the dangers before, which I suspect is true, or whether we have been really successful in reintroducing pollinators, and that a lot of people have started raising bees and putting flowers out, and then it worked. So this is my favorite item because good for the Washington Post for coming back and saying, okay, well, maybe the life as we know it on Earth is not about to be destroyed, and maybe there's good news. And telling stories about good news is not as profitable as telling stories about bad and scary news. So kudos for doing this.
Well, my favorite item was about chess, but not about a cheating scandal.
Uh-oh.
So I thought, let's draw attention to it. It is about the chess master behind Google's AI, which I didn't know that there was a chess phenom.
Really?
Piloting that. His name is, the Wall Street Journal profiled him. His name is Demis Hassabis, the neuroscientist tasked with keeping Google at the vanguard of artificial intelligence. And the Journal notes that he was the second, he's now 47, but he was the second best chess player in the world for his age group as a teenager. He helped create the hit video game theme park during a gap year before college. As head of the AI research lab DeepMind, he oversaw inventions that made the covers of Nature and Science magazines.
Cool.
And now he is piloting Google's AI. Well, that is all the time we have for the news around the news. The news about the news.
It's both
Around,
about and around.
If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com. That's wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com. And sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink-Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. Just search for Wretches.